Goodness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think Tim McIndoe spoke for 5 minutes. I didn't hear one word he said. I certainly didn't hear anything about a plan. Well, no, there was one word he said. He said that when Mr Nash is overseas, and I think he meant when I was overseas as Labour's Minister of Trade or perhaps Minister of Foreign Affairs. The member preempts what's going to happen in the next Labour cabinet, but thank you very much for the vote of confidence. Mr Speaker, I have also seen the member Paul Quinn sit there and write out about 122 letters. Can you please advise the honourable member that he only has to sign one letter of resignation and it'll be accepted. He doesn't have to hand a letter of resignation to every single member, but I'm sure if he did, it would be accepted by the other 121 members in this House. Mr Speaker, Tim McIndoe did say one thing which was very right. Mr McIndoe said that this election the voters have a choice. And to use Mr Key's words, this election will be a mandate around the sale of state assets. That is what his leader said. The people of New Zealand have two very clear choices. The government's plan to sell state assets, our power companies, Air New Zealand, Kiwi Bank, etc. So sell these state assets or keep our assets in New Zealand ownership and have much needed tax reform. So sell state assets and retain an unfair tax system, or a fair tax reform and keep state assets. Mr Speaker, selling state assets to foreign owners is not a plan for our future. It shows no vision and it represents no plan. In fact, it is in the same league as mining our national parks. These are the only two plans that government's come up with in 3 years. Sell state assets, mine national parks. The mine national parks was rejected outright, and as the Prime Minister said, the mandate around selling state assets is going to go the same way. Mr Speaker, let's be very clear about this. It will not be Ma and Pa investors who will own our power companies. It will be Australian pension funds, US investment partnerships and the Chinese government. And I'll tell you why. Because the vast majority of Ma and Pa's around this country are struggling at this point in time to put food on the table, petrol in the car, clothes on the kids' back, and to service a mortgage and pay their power account. It just shows how out of touch the Finance Minister of the National Government is if he believes that Ma and Pa investors can also afford to buy shares. And let's be honest. Let's be honest. Contact Energy is not owned by Ma and Pa New Zealand investors. 80% of Contact Energy, which Mr English privatised in his last stint as Finance Minister, is actually owned by 0.1% of the investors. $100 million of money that could be coming into government coffers now goes across to Australia. Mr Speaker, every single country in the OECD, except Switzerland and Turkey, has a capital gains tax. The OECD, the IMF, the Treasury, the Government Savings Working Group, Bill English, have all said New Zealand needs a capital gains tax. This is not rocket science. It is fair and equitable tax policy and reform that is necessary to ensure that all New Zealanders pay their fair share. The government's own tax working group has said, and I quote, a capital gains tax is generally said to support the integrity of the tax system by reducing opportunities for tax planning and tax avoidance. Robin Oliver, the recently retired but long-serving Deputy Commissioner of the IRD in charge of policy, wrote, "The concept of a CGT is not an economic concept, it is a concept from equity law." Mr Speaker, the voters of New Zealand have two choices. Sell our state assets and retain an unfair tax system or a fair tax system and retain our state assets. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to speak.